and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the founder of Scott Legal. Today, we are going to talk about the EB-5 investor program, and we're going to talk about regional centers. We're going to talk about entrepreneurs who want to start their own business, which is called the direct EB-5 investment program. We're going to talk about the differences between the two, and then we're also going to talk about moving from non-immigrant visa, such as an E2 visa, to an EB-5, which is a green card. And again, my name is Ian Scott. Before we jump into the presentation, just a few housekeeping items. If you do have any questions during the presentation, you can add those to either the question and answer box or the chat box. We will have lots of time to go over questions at the end or during the presentation. A few things in terms of items that we will send you after the presentation. We will send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation that we are going to go through. We will also send you a copy of this webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a copy of that. We'll also send you a copy of our EB-5 guide. We have a free comprehensive guide that describes the EB-5 program in detail and goes over a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And we will send you that. And then finally, we will send you some information with respect to how you can set up a consultation with us if you would like, would like more information. Yes, so without further ado, one last thing in terms of the when we do send you a recording of the presentation, the webinar, it is going to be linked to a YouTube webinar that is on our YouTube channel. So we do encourage you to sign up to our YouTube, subscribe rather to our YouTube channel, and to hit the notification button, because in addition to the EB-5 webinars and videos, we post videos to that channel every day. So so definitely there are interesting videos on other immigration topics, including EB-5. So without further ado, let us move to the presentation. So before we jump into the EB-5 program, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different types of investor visas. So I'm just going to run through these, but for the first type of investor visa that I'm going to talk about is the E2 visa. So the E2 visa is a visa that's available for nationals of certain countries. And this particular visa requires much less investment than the EB-5 that we're going to talk about today, and also doesn't have a set number of jobs that are required. The key difference between this and the EB-5, though, is that this is what's called a non-immigrant visa, and that means that it's not a green card. And then the other is that this is very country specific. There are about 80 countries in the world where this visa is available. Now, in terms of we run a quite extensive webinar series, and for all of these visas, investor visas that I'm talking about today, we have separate webinars. Some of them exceed 1 hour in terms of length. So this is just touching on the different types of investor visas, but we do encourage you to either sign up for a future webinar regarding these other types of investor visas, or go to our YouTube channel and you could watch a video there. The next type of investor visa, it's a EB-2. Under the EB-2 category, we do a lot of investor visas for individual entrepreneurs who have an idea that is going to be, benefit the U.S. in some ways, going to be in the national interest of the United States. So the national interest could be job creation. So it could just be that the particular endeavor is going to create U.S. jobs, or there could be some other interest to the United States. So we first look at the interest to the United States. We then look at whether or not the individual is well positioned to advance that particular endeavor, and then look at reasons why, on balance, the government should waive the labor certification process. And again, just touching on the national interest waiver, but we have many separate webinars on national interest waiver. We have one that just deals with national interest waiver for entrepreneurs, and then we also have another webinar that deals with just generally national interest waiver. The International Entrepreneur Rule, it's a new, well, it's an old program. It's a program that was introduced during the Obama administration. Then the next administration decided to shelve it and didn't cancel it, but didn't really do much with it. And then the Biden administration reintroduced the program, but it really hasn't gained a lot of traction. But this, if someone wasn't eligible for an E2 visa, because this one is not country specific, but then had particular investors or had government grants and things like that, there might be an ability for that individual or individuals to apply for this particular program. But again, there's a separate webinar on this that you could take a look at. And then finally, we're at the EB-5 program. And before we jump into the details, I do want to spend a little bit of time going over an overview of the program and the history, because there's really been quite a bit that has happened over the last year with respect to this program. So before you get these dates correct, but before June 30th of 2021, what happened was that the program, a long time ago when it started, it was the investment amount was set at an amount of $500,000. And then what happened during the last administration was they increased the investment amount to $900,000. There are two amounts, but just for the purposes of this discussion, from $500,000 to $900,000. And then there was a group of people who thought that that was an unlawful increase, and part of the reason had to do with the appointment of the head of that department, and they said that was unlawful, and a court agreed with them. So the amount was dropped back to $500,000. That was kind of one thing that was going on. Now, the other thing that was going on is the regional center program, not the direct investment, but the regional center program requires reauthorization periodically, and that reauthorization expired on June 30th of 2021. And what was interesting about that is it was unprecedented in that it had expired before, but just for a very short period of time. But this expiration lasted until March 11th of 2022. So from June 30th to March 11th of 2022, you weren't able to invest in the regional center program at all. And even the applications that were being adjudicated, that had already been submitted, there was really, before the June 30th date, there was really a question of what was going to happen to those. So then what happened was in March, or March 11th, 2022, everything was resolved, we'll say, where they changed the investment amount, and we're going to get into details of the changes, but they changed the investment amount, and also they had kind of redefined some of the rules and implemented some other changes to and to really make sure that this doesn't happen again. So that's a little bit about the program history, and we'll touch on that a little bit as we go through the presentation as well. Describe the details of that as we go through the presentation a little bit as well. Now, when you're looking at EB-5s, you're looking at either, we kind of break EB-5s into two different categories. So one is regional center and one is direct investment. So you should think of the regional center as a program where, so just as an example, let's say that a hotel chain wanted to build a large property somewhere in the United States. And let's say that property cost $100 million to build, and then the regional center would come in and manage this project, and then they would say, okay, well, we're going to get we want to raise $100 million, so we're going to get a bunch of people who want green cards to invest in this particular project. Say $800,000 each. We're going to come to the actual numbers in a bit, but $800,000 each to raise money, and then those people can possibly get green cards if they meet the rest of the criteria. But think of the regional center as really a fairly passive investor, someone who just wants to invest the money, have someone else create the jobs, and doesn't really want to be very involved in the day-to-day. Because always think of EB-5 green card as two major components. The one component is investing money, so the amount is going to be defined. We'll talk about the amount in a second. And then the second part is the creation of 10 full-time jobs, right? So So the regional center is really someone who doesn't really want to, who just wants to invest the money and doesn't really want very much more input. The direct investment, on the other hand, is an individual who's an entrepreneur and really wants control over their own money, right? So they want to invest the whatever it is, whether it's 800,000 or $1 million, and they want to invest it in their own business or in the business of another individual, or in another business. But they actually want, they want control, and they want to manage that, and they would be responsible for actually creating the jobs. So we'll get into that. We'll get into those differences in a little bit more detail as we run through the remainder of the presentation. But always think of it as they're kind of two different types of, or breaking the EB-5 rather into two categories, one being regional center and one being a direct investment. So, just to recap some of the things that I just went through, regional center, it's fairly passive. The other thing with regional centers is they have a very high administration fee. So when you do kind of, let's say you want to invest in a hotel project, you may pay an administration fee of 40, maybe even $50,000 with very low return. In fact, the return is actually going to be negative once you factor in the administration fee. But the idea here is that not that you're investing, and think of this always as an investment, because you could lose your money and you could also not get the green card. It is an investment like any other investment. But the return, it would be a fraction of a percent in the actual corporate documents. It would be a fraction of a percent in terms of a return, and very high fees. The projects, it's the projects can be risky. There are individuals who have invested money who have not gotten their green cards and have not gotten their money back, right? So you are giving money, like in the example of the hotel, you would be giving that project the money, and they would be giving you a security, like let's say a limited partnership unit or something. And if the company went bankrupt, or the company didn't create the jobs, or if the corporate documents said that they keep the money, whatever risk is associated with any investment. If you invest in the stock market, you could lose all of your money, right? So this is similar. The other kind of difference between regional center and direct investment is that for regional centers, when you're looking at the second component of the creation of 10 full-time jobs, so for every green card that is obtained through this program, the project would have to create 10 full-time jobs. For regional centers, they can include what's called indirect jobs in that count. Now, the indirect jobs really are, so for example, if you're putting a hotel into a particular area, you could get an economist to come and do some type of report that says, well, the result of this hotel being here, the hotel is going to need supplies and order food from these different places, and that's going to have a knock-on effect. And so it's the fact that the hotel's there is actually going to create indirect jobs in addition to the direct jobs, which would be people who actually work in the hotel. So that's very, very helpful, because often the indirect job number is quite substantial. So it allows a regional center to meet the target so that everyone can get their green card. In contrast to direct investment, individual wants control over the process, hiring, etc. Only direct jobs are counted, but you have the ability to unlimited return, really, right? Because it's your business, and you can your return is going to be whatever profit that the business generates. The other good thing about this particular program is this program is not, and has not ever been, subject to the reauthorization. So even in after June, when the regional center program was paused, this particular program still continued because it wasn't subject to reauthorization. So for the period of June 30th to March 11th, individuals were actually able to invest $500,000 in their business, and that was not considered that was considered fine, in the sense of the project didn't require reauthorization. And then when they did finally reauthorize the regional center program in March, they made it clear that the people who had invested during that lull period were all fine, and the $500,000 was fine as well. So one of the things we're going to talk about when we talk about the kind of E2 in particular to EB-5 is that if you have an existing business and you'd invested over time, then that money that you'd invested over time can be counted towards the business. as well. So, and we will get into a little bit more detail with respect to the differences between or the things, considerations of moving from an E2 to an EB-5. So now the crux of the EB-5 requirements, and these particular requirements apply for both regional centers and direct investment. But as I said, with the regional center, really what you're looking at is giving someone else money and then not really having to consider much else during that process. But what's required is an investment. All right, so the investment is going to be either $800,000 or $1,050,000, and you would be investing in what's called a new commercial enterprise. But a new commercial enterprise is not new in the sense of it just has to have been formed recently. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's in 1990s. Anything formed after that. There is a specific date, I just don't have it off the top of my head. That's considered a new commercial enterprise. So you could have a business that was formed in 2001, and you could have invested money over time for that particular business, and you would be able to include you'd be able to use that business, and you would be able to include the amounts that you'd invested over that period of time. Now, the difference between the 800,000 and the larger amount has to do with whether or not the business is in what's called a targeted employment area or a rural area. So rural is going to be defined by the county, so by the low population, and then a targeted employment area is an area where the unemployment rate is at least 1.5 times the national average. So that would be just under 6%. And so you would look at the census tract and you would determine whether or not that census tract, the government publishes what the unemployment rate is by census tract, and you would look at that, and you would it show you exactly whether or not you had to invest 800,000 or the 1 million. Now, sometimes the 1 million has some benefits, because then you don't have to worry about the location, because we do have some instances where people have to change locations, and that's a big deal if you have only invested the 800,000, because you may have to file an amendment. So it's but that's something to consider. In terms of the government, some of it's through case law and some of it's through regulation, has determined what can be included in investment. So, for example, the legal fees that you pay or the administrative fees that you pay. So if you invest in a regional center, and you gave the regional center 750,000, and then you paid them 50,000 fees, that wouldn't work, because the 50,000 doesn't count towards the investment. You would have to cough up another 50,000, invest the 800,000, and then pay the fees to them. Similarly, legal fees don't count in the investment. So you have to come up with 800,000 or $1 million of $1,050,000 of money that the government considers valid for the purposes of EB-5 investment. The investment, as I said earlier, can be made over time. We did an EB-5 direct recently where it was for a farm, and the person had started the farm, I don't know, 1995 or something, and they'd invested, at that time, the investment amount was 500,000. They'd invested money over a 10-year period, and we were able to take a look at each of those investments that were made over that period of time. And, as soon as we got to the 500,000, we were able to utilize that, and that was, that went fine, and the application was approved. The other thing to consider is that investment. So let's say someone, for example, has an E2 business, and the E2 business in year 2 made, let's say, $2 million, and then 1.5 million of that was profit, right? So that was sitting in the company. And then in retained earnings, and then the company in the next year used that $1.5 million and spent it on lots of different things, salaries and different things like that. That doesn't count towards investment. Investment has to be your personal investment that comes from outside of the company and invested into the company. That's very, very important. You can't invest through another entity, like another legal entity. It has to be your personal investment that is invested, and retained earnings doesn't count. For that example that I gave, for that to work, the company would have to pay you money. You pay an individual, like let's say one of the owners, money. They would have to pay taxes on that money and then reinvest that. And you would want to show a clear audit trail of that the money going out of the company, going into the personal bank account, paying taxes on it, and then being reinvested into the business. You'd want to show that. There are a number of differences between E2 and EB-5. They're similar in the sense of they both require an investment and they both require you to hire employees, but there are lots of differences. So one difference has to do with, items that can be included. For E2, we do include legal fees and administrative fees. For EB-5, we cannot. Another big difference is for E2, it's fine to use the investment can be the purchase of a business. So let's say someone buys a restaurant for $800,000 and gives $800,000 to the seller. That's completely fine for E2, but not for EB-5. EB-5, the money can't go to the seller. The money has to be invested directly into the business. So in that instance, the $800,000, let's say they bought 50% of the business, then the $800,000 would have to go into the business bank account and then spent on the business, right? So rather than being sold, so we had given to the seller. So we have many instances where people have obtained an E2 and they've obtained it based on purchasing a business, but the original investment doesn't count. So they would have to invest an additional 800,000 or 1,050,000 into the business before that counts. The other big difference has to do with source of funds. When we're looking at E2 visas, you have to, for both visas, the EB-5 and the E2, you have to show where the money came from and prove that it came from a legitimate source. And although the statutes have very similar wording when it comes to this particular requirement, the adjudicators, it's quite different. For an E2, we go in very, very light with E2 and provide very limited information on the source of funds, whereas EB-5, the source of funds sections can at times be thousands of pages. And the government really, in my opinion, have bent over backwards to really extend, I think, the requirement in terms of what is actually required to show legitimate source of funds. And we have applicants who have obtained money that dates back to 1965, and we have adjudicators coming back to us with wanting details about transactions that happened that long ago, right? So it really is quite extensive. The other big difference is job creation. The EB-5 has a very specific number with requirements of you have to have 10 full-time employees. Those employees have to be green card holders or US citizens. For the E2, the employees can be anything. They can be, as long as they're legally eligible to work in the United States, that's fine. And then also there's no set amount. And often you can, with an E2, 3 would usually be sufficient. But the key is that there is no set amount. So quite a bit of differences between the E2 and EB-5. And, another key difference is the E2 is country specific, where EB-5, nationals from any country can apply. We talked about source of funds a little bit, and we also for EB-5, it does have to be some type of an equity investment. You couldn't just invest by, like, for example, giving a loan to a different company. So it can be like a limited partnership unit, it can be a membership unit, it can be a share, any type of equity would work. And then we talked a little bit about job creation, that you're required to create 10 full-time jobs. If it's a regional center, indirect jobs count as well. So you're going to get an economist report that says that this particular endeavor is creating X number of indirect jobs. And then for direct investment, you're going to be looking at full-time jobs, not part-time jobs. And as I said, you would be looking at individuals with that are U.S. citizens, or green card holders. So that's something that is going to be required in terms of the meeting that particular requirement. The other kind of key thing that both E2 and EB-5 require is a detailed business plan, right? So if you're doing a regional center, the regional center is going to have the business plan already prepared as part of the whole kind of package showing all of the jobs that they plan on creating. But if you're doing a direct investment, you do have to spend time on your business plan, and the business plan has to be a credible business plan that shows exactly how you plan on creating the jobs over time. So, you'd have to show the job descriptions, provide documentation with respect to how it is that you plan on accomplishing the goals that you have indicated. The other kind of very important aspect has to do with the investment linking to job creation. So let's say, for example, an individual is investing in a business that had 4 full-time employees, and then the employees were already working there, and then the person invested in the business, $1 million, we'll even say they invested in the business, $1,050,000 they invested in the business, and then said, well, I have 4 employees already, so now I only have to create 6. Well, that's not correct, because the 4 employees didn't have anything to do with the $1,050,000 that was invested. So in that particular example, you'd actually have to create 10 more jobs, because there has to be a link between the investing the money and creating the jobs. And that's similar to the similar with the example I gave when someone's buying a particular buying an entity from someone, buying a business, like someone, for example, buying a restaurant from someone else. It's similar in the sense that the money is not going towards job creation, because it's going to the seller. In fact, it's not linked to the business at all. So something to keep in mind. And one of the things that's very important is sometimes companies don't focus. In particular, this is relevant for, well, it's relevant for both direct relevant for both regional centers and the direct program. But sometimes companies don't focus a lot on I-9 compliance and making sure that workers are qualified to work in the US. But it's very important for EB-5, because the workers have to be green card holders or US citizens. So when you go through the process and you are kind of removing conditions on a green card, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, then you have to actually show that they're qualified, so show their US passport, show their green card, show that they, make sure that that's all relevant and correct. So in terms of the process for EB-5, in terms of how we file an EB-5 petition, the first petition that's filed is called an I-526 petition. And what this petition does is it looks at whether or not you have met the criteria just based on the merits, right? So if you've invested the 800,000, you are in a TEA or rural area, that you have a business plan in place that shows that you're going to create the 10 full-time jobs, the funds are committed. That's another important thing to kind of comment on in terms of what's required here is the funds actually do have to be committed, right? So you can't just start a company, put $800,000 in a business bank account, create a business plan, submit that to the government, and say, well, I'd like my EB-5 green card now. The 800,000 would have to be committed in terms of irrevocable contracts or spent, right? That's the best way to have it committed, is that it's actually spent. But that's what the I-526 is looking at. It's looking at all of those things, that you've met the core requirements. Now, one of the big changes in well, actually, let me back up. So then whenever you're filing for a green card, there are always 2 ways to get the green card. So one way is if you're in the United States, and you can file an I-485 petition, which is an adjustment of status petition. And the other way is that you can do consular processing, right? So that's, you're getting the green card at the actual US consulate abroad. So one of the big changes on March 11th was that up until then, the only option was to do consular processing, because you weren't allowed to file the I-485 concurrently with an I-526 petition. But that was one change that was made, and it's really a significant change given how long it's taking to adjudicate I-526 petitions, which can be 3 to 4 years. But now you can actually file the I-485 petition concurrently. And the benefit of that is, if the person's in the United States, it gives them the ability to stay in the United States and to get work authorization, and remain in the United States until the petition has been adjudicated. And it can take 3 to 4 years for the petition to be adjudicated. They can also apply, the individual can also apply for travel authorization. So within a year, that person can go back and forth and work in the United States until the I-526 has been adjudicated. So it can really give them quite a lengthy period of time to remain in the United States. The I-829 petition is the petition that's filed, like, so after your I-526 petition has been approved and your I-485 or consular processing, you've actually had the green card. Then 2 years after you've had the green card, you would apply for an I-829 petition, and that petition is a petition that is removing the condition. So you're basically showing the US government that you are actually able to create the 10 full-time jobs, right? Because the I-526, you're saying, I will create the 10 full-time jobs. The I-829 is showing that I have created the full-time jobs. So just some of these we went through already, but the key changes, and some of the key changes to the EB-5 program. One, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but the program has been reauthorized to September 30th, 2027. So this is the regional center program, which is, it's a decent period of time. It's, several years out. And then the other thing is just so that the same issue that happened last year doesn't happen again this year. The statute now says anybody who files before September 30th, 2026, that they will actually adjudicate your petition, right? So that's because that was a big problem. There were some pending petitions. We didn't know if they would be adjudicated, and USCIS stopped adjudicating them, right? So this is kind of saying that if, at least, because, the key thing here is you want clients to have certainty. So this gives them that certainty. We talked about the increase of the minimum amount and the maximum amount. And then the other big change was that to become a targeted employment area used to be a lot easier. So that's no longer the case. And then one other big change is they set aside a number of different areas so that because what happens is that there are 10,000 of these green cards are issued every year. And for most countries, it doesn't matter because they don't ever reach the cap. But some countries do, like China. And so when they reach that cap, it means that the people are put in a queue. So they may have several years to wait before they're eligible. But then what the government did is they said that for certain types of projects, they will let these, these percentages that are listed on the slide, they'll let them move some of those people to the front of the line. So the government's just saying that because they feel that these particular areas are important, we want to make sure that we're giving these people green cards based on that. And they also, kind of reiterated that if you filed before June 30th, that those applications would actually be adjudicated. I think we talked about that already. We talked about the I-485 and the concurrent filing with the I-526, and that was like I said, a really big change that really benefits a lot of people. And now we didn't mention this, but one of the other changes was that before you just had to show source of funds requirement, like where the money came from, just for the 800,000 or the 1,050,000. Now they're saying you have to actually show it for administration fees as well and legal fees. So that could, bring up the amounts to 80, 90,000 that you have to show source of funds documentation for. They also clarified loans and gifts can come from anyone. So that's because I think that some lawmakers were kind of wanted to limit it and say loans and gifts can only come from immediate relatives, but that didn't pass. And then there's some ability to change programs if something happens to the particular regional center. So the other considerations, and one of the first one we talked about, at-risk investment. So the putting money in a bank account and just leaving it, this is not an intent to invest. They want you to show that you have invested. So either it's spent or you have firm commitments like lease, employment contracts, etc. Loans and gifts are fine for EB-5 as long as the security is not the actual business. If it is a loan, make sure that the individual has been makes the loan payments over the years, because keep in mind, this is not going to be adjudicated for several years. So several years down the road, they're going to say, well, this was a loan, show me that the payments have been made. Same thing with gift, because the adjudication is going to be happening way down the road. You may have to show that the individual paid, who gave the gift, actually paid gift tax in their jurisdiction. It's very important because the government can deny the petition if they feel that what you've asserted is not actually accurate and that there's not supporting documentation. We talked about this, considerations of purchasing a business. We talked about it, how it doesn't really work in terms of that amount can't be, included. The investment, how much do you have to own? Unlike E2, you only have to own, a very low amount. Sorry, E2, you have to own 50% of the amount. EB-5, you can own a very low amount. That's not a problem at all. For EB-5, you can't have any returns on investment. And then I think that moving from E2 to EB-5, we talked about that during the presentation. So let's just look at this example quickly to run through, just some of the things that to reinforce some of the things that we talked about during the presentation. So let's say that Helen, she has an E2 visa and she got it in 2015. And she purchased a business for $300,000. So she gave the seller $300,000. That business had 5 full-time employees when she purchased the shares, and she paid $40,000 in legal fees, right? So then 4 years pass, and she took another $500,000 that was given to her as a gift. Someone gave her a gift, and the person who gave the gift obtained the money from the sale of a property that they inherited 15 years ago. Instead of giving the money to Helen, though, they deposited the money directly into Helen's business bank account. Okay. When the money was invested, 500,000, she had 10 full-time employees. So that's the new 500,000. She had 10 full-time employees working at the company. So she hired 5, because remember, there were 5 there before, and she hired another 5 people. At the end of 2019, she paid herself a bonus of $100,000 after the company made $1 million, right? So she's paid herself money. And then in January, she applied for the EB-5, saying that she's invested $1.8 million at 300 initial, the 500,000 from the gift, and then the $1 million from the retained earnings, because the company made that much money. And then she also says she has 10 full-time employees and doesn't really want to hire anymore, not committed to it anyway. And then she's located in an area where the unemployment rate is 7%. So we'll act like this is today. So let's just talk about a few of the issues that this particular example creates. So the first issue has to do with the fact that Helen bought the business for $300,000. She gave, that's fine for E2, but she gave the seller $300,000, took shares. So none of that $300,000 can be counted as investment, and the 5 full-time employees cannot be counted as investment. The $40,000 in legal fees cannot be counted as investment. However, and the other thing to keep in mind is that for while E2, you don't have to look at the $40,000 for source of funds, but for EB-5, you would. So when we're doing the EB-5 assessment, we would, if we were trying to include when we're doing an EB-5, any amounts paid legal fees, that you have to do a source of funds analysis on that as well. So now the interesting thing with the, a friend who gifted her $500,000. So remember what we said about the gift tax, about making sure that friend has paid it. The other thing is the friend got the money from the sale of a property. So you have to, have all the documentation related to the sale of the property. But now the property, that person got it from somebody who died. They inherited the money, someone who, they inherited 15 years ago. So unfortunately, USCIS doesn't care. You have to go back and you'd have to get documentation showing, the disposition of the property, etc., and where that person got the money from, the person who passed away. So this can start to get really complicated. The other big problem here is that the person deposited the money in Helen's business bank account, which is a big no-no. Helen has to be in possession and control of the funds before they go into the business, or it's not considered investment. And USCIS is denied for just this reason in the past. So it's a big no-no that the money was put into the business account. We already said the 5 employees from before didn't count. But the other thing to kind of keep in mind is if Helen paid herself a bonus of 100,000, like she's nowhere near the total investment amount anyway. But let's say she, invested, let's say that she did invest $800,000 and, keep in mind the unemployment rate 7%. So, she'd only have to invest the $800,000 because that $800,000 a million applies for both regional centers and direct investment. It doesn't matter which one it is. But let's say she just invested 800,000, but then she later paid herself $100,000 in bonus. Then the government's going to say she only invested 700,000. So you have to, especially when you're very close to the investment amount, you have to be very, very careful about any of the expenditures that are made for EB-5. And it becomes quite a process as we immigration attorneys go through it, making sure that USCIS is not going to find something to complain about. Yeah, and then of course the retained earnings doesn't count. She says she invested 1.8 million, and and we talked about already, the employees didn't count. So lots of things to, lots of things to consider there. Lots of things to consider there, and I think it's there's always, I'd say the EB-5s are the most complex investor visa petition. So definitely, definitely require assistance putting these together. So some final considerations, timing. EB-5 petitions take, unbelievable amount of time to adjudicate, 3 to 4 years. So we actually often file mandamus petitions where we sue the US government saying that it's an unreasonable period of time, and we've been successful with those. But the I-526 approval is 3 to 4 years, and then you would probably expect another year or 18 months after that for the I-485, because they're new. That process is new. We talked a little bit about country-specific quotas. I think right now both India and China are what are called retrogress, so they're delayed. If you're in the United States on a particular visa, you have to be very careful about when you're applying, especially given these long waits, because if you're have a visa that's a non-immigrant visa that's not dual intent, you do have to be careful that you're not putting yourself in a position where you have to renew that visa while the I-526 is pending. So if you're on a visa like a H-1B or an L-1, which is a dual intent visa, that's definitely beneficial. And then the other thing you can consider is that we have a client that we did EB-5 direct for her. She was approved, and we're also doing national interest waiver for her because she'd actually prefer national interest waiver because there are less, once you're approved, and there are no more requirements. But people do consider parallel green card strategies all the time. And, I think the other thing is just that planning is definitely key for, planning is definitely key for these types of visas. Well, that really covers all of the remarks that I have. So we will move into questions and answers, and we do have a few of those. So let's jump into those. So one question we have has to do with the someone's asking about the ability for 2 or 3 or more people to get green cards under the same entity under the direct program. So that is possible. That is, and then we do that, we do that all the time. So what happens there is that each person has to invest the requisite amount. So let's say that's in a targeted employment area, then each person would invest $800,000. And then for each person that you plan on getting the green card for, the 10 full-time jobs would have to be created, right? So let's say it's 4 people, they could each own 25%, that ownership percentage doesn't have to be 25, 25, 25, but they own 25%. Then you'd have to create 40 jobs in that instance. So, but definitely, definitely possible, and you can do that without an issue. Someone else wanted to, and I think we went over this during the presentation, but let me just kind of reiterate it. The whole idea of when you purchase a business and what can be, what in the purchase amount can be included towards the investment. So if you purchase a business, and use the example again of the restaurant where you purchase the business for $500,000 and you give all that $500,000 to the seller, none of that can be used for the investment, but it doesn't mean that the entity itself still can't be an EB-5 entity, because all it means is that if you have that particular entity, then you would have to invest another 800,000 or 1,050,000 in that particular entity, spend it, because if you own the entity, it's sometimes very difficult to apply for EB-5 if money is just sitting in a bank account, spend it, and then you could apply for the EB-5, or have firm commitments and then you could apply for the EB-5. So really the idea is that the money should be go to job creation, and that's why they have that particular rule. The last question we have here has to do with the TEA and how one kind of figures out what is a targeted employment area and what's not. And the way that's done is that the government just publishes the information. So you would go by census tract and you would look, the census tract. So like, let's say you're in an area in Harlem or whatever. Let's say there was a census tract in Harlem. That census tract would say, X number of people live here, and then it would have statistics. One of the statistics is that the unemployment rate. So at the time, and you're always looking at this at the time you make the investment. And so when you make the investment, you would be looking. So let's say that, like as in our example, let's say the unemployment rate was 7%, then you would say, okay, perfect. I only have to invest, you'd print that information out so you have it handy, and then you would invest $800,000, and that would be all that you would be required to invest at that particular point in time, because you are in a targeted employment area. But then just be careful, like that means that the employees have to work in that area, right? That's the key. They don't have to, necessarily live in that area. They could, but the office has to be there and they have to be coming to work in that particular area. So so that's something to keep in mind, especially in these days of people working remotely. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That was all we had to share today. And again, we'll send out a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, a copy of the actual video, and our E2 visa guide. And definitely, if you have any questions about moving to an E2, or moving from E2 to EB-5, or doing an EB-5, either regional center or direct, we'd be happy to help. And we'll also send out some consultation details to be able to do that. And again, my name is Ian Scott. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.